The gentleman from Coast, Mr. Helsel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, I did not come here this morning to try to bore you, but I feel so compelled to make sure that all of my colleagues know the twists and the turns of House Bill 1573. House Bill 1573 was offered for consideration on January the 26th. The bill took the course of all other bills that traveled through the process that is in place in this chamber. House Bill 1573, I believe, could easily have been called a jobs bill. The reason for that statement, Mr. Speaker, I will touch on just a bit further in the address. HB 1573 was developed for the working watermen of Virginia, a group of men and women who traverse the waterways of Virginia every day of their lives. The conditions that they work in are certainly some of the harshest conditions that anyone could face in their jobs. Mr. Speaker, no matter what the weather conditions are, it is imperative for the Virginia watermen to work through the cold of winter and to work through the heat of summer. They have families and they have needs just as any other family does, and they must work every day to provide for their family. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank everyone in this chamber for supporting House Bill 1573. You heard the watermen's cries and you realized the need for House Bill 1573. And not only do I thank you, but the watermen of Virginia thank you. Mr. Speaker, after crossover, I waited for the Senate to schedule the hearing of these three bills. And among those bills was HB 173. I did what each of you do and have done, presented my bills to the subcommittee. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1572, House Bill 1574 were heard and passed out of the committee. Thankfully, after some long discussion, House Bill 1573 passed out as well. Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday, the 15th of February after session, I was visited by the Commissioner of the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. We spoke for a while, and suddenly we heard where we were in some sort of negotiations regarding the bill that had been talked about. The Commissioner's suggestions regarding HB 1573, in my opinion, would have stripped the bill of its intended purpose. And so I asked the Commissioner to write down exactly how he wanted the bill to read. He did, and I gave it a very quick review. Unfortunately, the Commissioner's opinion, in my view, did not help to build on the watermen, but actually gutted the bill of its intended purpose. And that purpose, Mr. Speaker, is to make it just a little more difficult to revoke a license of any waterman on their first offense. I was taken aback, Mr. Speaker, just before the Commissioner left my office, when the real purpose of our meeting was expressed and also exposed. The Commissioner told me that he had been asked by the Governor to persuade me that the Governor's way regarding HB 1573 was the only way. I asked the Commissioner if he had spoken with anyone on the committee that was going to hear the bills, and he indeed had spoken with several of those folks. Mr. Speaker, I am appalled at the actions of the Governor and appalled at the actions of the Commissioner that took place yesterday. It was a cheap shot. Mr. Speaker, when I was elected to my first term here in the House, my mission was to do all that I could to help the constituents that I serve. Not once have I found the need to try to hijack anyone's bill by going behind someone's back without at least having the common decency to speak with them first. Mr. Speaker, I've learned a great deal this week as it relates to integrity. The actions of the Governor and the Commissioner and Commissioner Bull will not deter me from the course that I am on. Mr. Speaker, what happened to me Wednesday of this week should never happen to anyone trying to support their constituents. Virginia watermen are always going to have a voice in state government as long as I sit in this seat. Mr. Speaker, I will not yield to the commissioner. I will not yield to the governor, both trying to work behind my back to accomplish what they want and not what my constituents want. Mr. Speaker, HB 1573 was not being considered. If it was not being considered for a veto, I'm quite sure it is now. So, Mr. Speaker and members of the House, just let me thank you again so much for allowing me this opportunity this morning. Thank you.